Bring it a blazing.
Hey, good afternoon, Senator.
How are you?
Excellent.
Good to see you.
Good to see
Thanks.
you. Thank you for joining me for this edition of Discover UC, brought to us by Astorg Auto.
Sounds good. Nice car.
Yeah, it is a nice car. Enjoy getting a chance to drive it around town. So, why don't you tell us about how your career started and what led you to pursue public service and become an elected official?
Well, I was raised in politics.
Mm-hmm.
My father was a governor and the only three-term governor of the state and a congressman. And he was also a member of the House of Delegates in the 50s. So I was raised around parades and political discussions and speeches and election night excitement. And my interest in current events and the impacts that I saw he and my mother as a couple had in public service or something that I guess I had hidden in the back of my mind because I majored in zoology, which has nothing to do with political science. And
Just
I
loved pets.
just loved. I was pre-med, but it wasn't meant to be. So anyway, in 1996, I decided the kids were older. Our children were older, and I decided, maybe this would be a good time to stick my toe in it, and I ran for the local House of Delegates. I won by a very, very small margin, and I sort of lamented that. I thought, gosh, Dad, I barely got elected. His advice, and he always had great advice, was, doesn't matter, honey, you're there. So, and he was right. And so then I served there, really, really liked serving in the West Virginia legislature, impactful to our state, but also could still do all of the things in the community that I was accustomed to doing with our family. And then in 2000, Bob Wise our incumbent congressman, decided to run for governor. And he was successful, but when he ran, it left an open seat, which is very rare and had been really rare in West Virginia. So I ran for the open seat. I ran and I won again by a very small margin.
Detecting a theme here.
Yes, I'm detecting a theme. All my margins have grown. So that really jolted me into the United States Congress at a really pivotal time in our country.
What was the transition like going from being a state legislator, an elected official, to then serving in Congress and not only representing the state, but being responsible for our entire country?
Well, really, major transition for me. On the personal side, I got elected on a Tuesday, and on Sunday, I was in D.C. for the week, the very first week right after the election. Well, that jolted me because I realized I missed the volleyball banquet. I realized that my personal life was going to be much different and going back and forth. But I've always gone back and forth to Charleston. We live here in Charleston, and that way I can much more easily serve the state. That was a tough transition for me. I think it was harder for me than it was for the children or my husband Charlie, because they really then forged a much stronger bond than they might have naturally had. And but then on the policy side and the political side, I was deemed the member of Congress most likely to lose a re-election because I'd won by such a small margin, and our state at that point had been capitalized by a different party than the one I was in. So I had to work really hard, and I did. And so then on the policy, obviously my learning curve had to go way up because there were a lot of, you're talking military, agriculture, education, taxes, banking, just transportation, on and on and on. But what you do get is a staff. So you have to choose wisely a staff that's knows Capitol Hill, has West Virginia. I like to hire West Virginians, and I do hire quite a few, but has that West Virginia feeling that I want, personalization in my office, but also knows how to work the halls of Congress.
What's changed the most since you began serving in D.C. to kind of where we are today?
I think the biggest change has been in, and it's changed everything, not just the political or government world is the way we communicate and the speed at which you communicate. And for instance, in my first shop, we were a communications shop. Let's make sure we get the weeklies, that the weeklies know what we're doing, and let's make sure we get on the talk show in Martinsburg, and those are still really important things, but a lot of people don't get their news that way.
Right.
And I think so that skill set, much more video. Here we are today doing this, so much more video, much more instantaneous. I think communication, I think the tenor has obviously changed in Washington, and I think it sort of matches up with the communication. We have our 24-hour news cycle on our media. We have conservative and liberal TV and radio. It wasn't like that as much. It was much more even-handed, I think, and less destructive in some ways to the individual. We can always disagree, but we don't have to rip each other apart. And that's probably been one of the biggest changes on the negative side that I've seen over the last 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, so let's talk about what has changed over your kind of time in D.C. Let's start with a positive. What are some positive ways where you think kind of Congress has kind of gotten better at doing the things that we as citizens hope that our elected officials are able to do on our behalf?
Well, one of the things I think that's a misconception of Congress is that we never get along and that we always disagree. I would say 90% of the time we can find a balance. And I certainly work towards that on my committees. So that is a positive that I think people need to know and realize occurs on almost a daily basis. I think in a positive way, I think the framework of which we work on the global scene, obviously it changed on 9/11. I mean, we can no longer look inwardly and feel we're safe, we're insulated, this is never going to be a part of our lives. And I think over the last 2 decades that I've been there, it's become a large part of our lives. It's become, how do we fortify the military? What about our intelligence assets? What kind of travel do we have? What kind of documentations do we have? What kind of identity markers or can we obtain? And you see there's always a push and pull there because there's folks that feel that they don't want the government to have any of their biomarkers or anything, even if it's for your own safety. So we got a lot of push and pull in that area, and that's something that I think has changed over the last 20 years. The focus has been more outward, global, where it needs to be. I mean, my favorite issues are the West Virginia issues, but still, if the decisions are going to be made, I always say, I'm at a really pivotal time, I believe, in our nation's history. And I take that as a solemn responsibility.
Sure. Now, you'd mentioned on the negative side, kind of the, increased personalization and personal attacks. What else seems to have kind of moved in the wrong direction?
Well, I think that the parties, the political parties, I'm a Republican, the political parties and the Democrat Party, they've become polarized within themselves.
Right.
You have the far left and the far right. And instead of maybe two parties with we have the same goals. We want a safe and prosperous America. How do we get there? We have different ways of determining or believing, philosophical beliefs to how we get there. But instead of working to get the majority or of opinion on your side, it's more like ripping from within. I mean, we're and I've never seen it's gotten worse over the last 10 years of on both sides.
Right. So let's switch gears a little bit. I know one of the things that you're very passionate about is women in leadership.
Yes.
So tell us, why is that important to you, and what are some of the things that you're doing here in the state to try to advance this issue?
I do believe that a diverse Congress, including women's voices, we've had 2,000 senators, or 2,000 male senators in our history, over 2,000, and I'm the 45th woman. I mean, that's pretty low. And I'm the first woman from West Virginia. And so I decided, having the history of having my dad and my mom being prominent and being able to affect lives, what I loved hearing the stories about my dad, and I was just up in Wheeling. I always get them when I go to the Northern Panhandle. I was in the Navy. I came home. I couldn't get my job back the way it was supposed to be. And your dad was my congressman, and he straightened it out for me. I mean, just how you affect individual people. Or another one, your dad talked at Boise State. I'm the county commissioner now because I got interested in public service, but I'll never forget your dad's speech. So I thought, what would I want my daughter to hear? And I thought what I would want her to hear is to run into a young woman or however age woman at this point, it wouldn't matter, and say, I heard your mother speak, and she really enlightened me into public service, or I wanted to be an astronaut or something like that. And she affected my life and made me want to be a leader. And so I started something called West Virginia Girls Rise Up, and where I go to the schools. I picked 5th grade. You have 2 daughters, you know.
Right.
You get them too old and they won't talk anymore. So I thought 5th grade was good. They've thought about a lot of things, but they're still young enough to want to talk, and so it's been very successful. I've been to, I think, maybe 34 schools around the state. I try to pick the schools that don't get visitors all the time. There's some that get them all the time. I just did one here in Charleston with Halle Berry, who's an award-winning actress, and they loved her, and they had seen her movies. It was kind of amazing. So that's what I try to do with leadership, and it's kind of on 3 stools, and it's education, it's physical fitness and health, and then it's self-confidence.
Excellent. Well, as you mentioned, I have 2 daughters, and I applaud you for that important work. I think one of the most important things for me as a father of daughters is trying to instill in them a sense of confidence,
right,
while still being modest and humble, in their successes, and recognizing that there's no limits to what they can do.
Right.
And the more that young people and young women in particular can hear that message, all the better. So, tell me, what has you the most excited about West Virginia's future?
I tell you what I'm excited about. There is a palpable, upbeat, optimistic feeling in West Virginia that we haven't had for a while. What's nice about a small state, and I think particularly nice about West Virginia, is when these entities come in and they want to get a flavor of what's the governance like or what's the education like, we can get everybody to the table really quickly. And in a big state, you can't really do that. They never see their senators. They never, you can go to Kroger's and run into either me or Joe. So, I mean, so I feel like I have a part of that. So I'm excited about the economic possibilities. I'm excited about some of the new career fields that I see developing. I mean, here, cybersecurity, some of the more high-tech fields that you can do remotely. You can do from anywhere or do anyhow, any way, and that makes me excited. I'm excited because I think our tourism possibilities have just exponentially grown over the last years, and I've really grown to appreciate them a lot more as I get older, and now I have grandchildren who I want to take around and show them, the zoo in Wheeling or some other places. It's fun for me. So I'm excited about the future of our state. I think it's going to be a good future. We just have to figure out a way, and you're doing this every day, how to keep our young people in the state, to kind of hook them not so much to a job, but to hook them into the way of life that we have that is really quite simple and easy.
Yeah, absolutely. Great quality of life here, and we thank you so much for
Thank
all
you.
you do to contribute to it.
Good driving.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Senator, great
All
to
right.
see you as always.
Good to see you. Thanks.